Hey everybody, Jayborino here. I have a special guest today. This is Bilxor, the creator of LifeForce, and I'm going to be doing a mapmaker interview with him, similar to how I did with Talonel and Avondale and Team Aniac. So I really look forward to some of the insights that he can share with us. So Bilxor, why don't you tell us a little bit, getting right into it, on how you got started with LifeForce. I'm going to be playing through the third mission as we get started here.
Sure. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on and posting this video and, uploading all my stuff onto your channel. It's been an awesome way to get the word out, and more than anything, I love it when people play my map. So, first of all, thank you so much for that.
Of course. I love it. I
Yeah.
love playing it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, what was the question? How I got started with LifeForce?
Yeah, I should be a little more detailed. So everybody kind of has their own motivation for starting, and the SC2 editor is known for being quite complex. And I'm kind of
Oh, yeah.
curious to know, were you following any other projects that other people were making, whether it be on the arcade or any of these other custom campaigns offline, or kind of what got you interested in even starting this project?
Well, I guess it's been like kind of a natural continuation of kind of my dream of kind of map making with Blizzard's tools. Like I've been kind of doing this since Warcraft 2. I initially started with that editor and is the weakest editor anyone's ever seen. There's no triggers, there's no data, you can't even change units' names. And really it's just building a terrain, and then you start with a town hall and you fight the AI controlled orc. That's pretty much it. And I remember diving into that when I was like 12 years old, and I made like 30 or 40 maps when it's just like the most mundane, straightforward maps. So I feel like I've always kind of had this little bug inside of me that says like, take people's content, mess around with it, and make it mine. But LifeForce is by far has been the one where I've invested myself the most and kind of like drew up the most plans. And I hear people use the word polished a lot, and I really think it's the most polished project. And the way I first got into LifeForce was I was actually working on a different campaign before this. It was really heavily influenced by Warcraft 3 kind of map, and it was a hero-controlled kind of dungeon crawler. But it was my very first project, and I was flying by the seat of my pants, didn't know what I was doing, and just it would have taken so much work to make it like really good and playable. I really would have had to start over. It's this little RPG called Firebat's Tale, and I might actually release it, just the first map, just to get it out there, just for funsies.
Yeah.
But after working on that for a while and kind of like shelving it, and then getting back to real life, and then looking around at the StarCraft scene after Heart of the Swarm came out, I kind of thought to myself, what's the custom campaign that I would really love to play? Like, what's the continuation of what's already out there for the Blizzard assets, and what is the community? What would they really love? What would people want to play? And so I kind of started daydreaming, putting together ideas, and I kind of knew from the start I wanted a mix of macro-based stuff and micro-based stuff. So you'll kind of see that in every mission. There's kind of a not 50-50, it's like 75% macro based on time, but I wanted a mix of that kind of stuff, lots of different kind of scenarios and gameplay styles, really kind of being motivated by what Blizzard's done, where each mission in the campaign is like a little bit different, but still you kind of see that consistency, like same character story development, but like, really keep the player guessing.
Cool. So you said that you had an original map before. Was that just like a scenario map, or was that the start of a campaign?
It was a start of a campaign. Anyone who's ever built a campaign knows that the very easiest part is just that kind of like brain diarrhea, where you have so many great ideas and you want to create these mechanics and these heroes with these abilities and this crazy storyline. And it was, I'm not sure if you're familiar. Oh yeah. I know you know Warcraft 3 from your channel, but it was, you start as one hero, and you can power up your abilities based on every level up, and you have to skip an ability on every level. It's just like Warcraft 3, where you can't go 1, 2, 3. You have to power it up to level 1, level 3, level 5.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really similar to that, and it followed the storyline of a different mercenary who's just this firebat, and he was being sent on missions. And I got about a third done with the second map, and it was really cool. I had a lot of, I utilized a lot of bank data. I didn't have to learn anything new with the bank for LifeForce. Like, it was a very bank heavy thing where there's items and level ups, and you kind of like mold your characters a lot like a Warcraft 3 kind of RPG. And it was just like a little janky. Like, I kept going back and like putting new layers of polish on it and like tweaking things, but it just didn't. I kind of felt like I was putting lipstick on a pig a little bit. Like, it just wasn't didn't have that professional flow. So And plus, it was all the same kind of thing. It was all very micro heavy, like get the heroes from A to B, and it just wasn't really dynamic enough. And I feel like the story felt a little truncated. There wasn't a lot of room for it to grow, and I just wasn't in love with the project. And because of that, I kind of pushed myself to finish. Like I said, I'll probably put it out on Mapster, like maybe in the next couple of weeks. So I think it's a pretty fun thing, and the boss is really interesting. Like I don't know if you noticed from LifeForce, but each boss is so different from the other. Like I'm a really trigger-oriented mapper, and bosses are all just triggers basically. And so I think I kind of was influenced by that too to make a boss level in each of my like RTS style maps. I think that's something that brings a little flair to the maps.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Boss fights are definitely a fan favorite in my experience, if done correctly, and I feel that your bosses are very well done.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
So transitioning from that map to LifeForce, I guess, like you said, it seemed like you wanted to make something that was a little bit more polished. How did you learn the editor? Was it all just hands-on experience? Did you look up any tutorials? What really got you in the mood to really put up with all of the complexities within it?
You know, that is an awesome question. If you go back on Mapster, se2mapster.com, and you look up my username, you can find the most newbie questions that I was asking almost every single day. Like, what's the difference between units and actors? And, like, what are actor events? And how do I change the terrain layer? And, like, all these most newbie questions. And really, honestly, the really only way is to, like, suck it up and realize you're a noob and start tinkering with things and be ready to put in your time. Like, the editor takes so many hours to, like, really get down. And I feel like almost... I don't even know if I should say this, but I feel like Blizzard almost made it like a little difficult on purpose, and I don't know why. Because like if you look at even the tooltips on the editor, the only tooltips where the Blizzard filled it in and wrote what things do are the really straightforward, obvious ones. Like if you look at like physics impact maps, like they're not going to tell you what that is, but if you look at like unit name, it'll give you like a little paragraph of what the unit name is. So it's like really weird like that, and so. I mean, there's no way it would have been possible if I didn't have a resource like Mapster, where there's so many people who have so much knowledge and are also programmers at the same time, so they just have the brain for it. Mm-hmm. If I didn't have those guys to bounce questions off of and put up with my newbiness, like, there's no way I would ever be able to learn anything. And I mean, a lot of what you get on Mapster is kind of like the wings to be able to fly. Like you have to like start to kind of understand how things work, and then you can look at the editor and look at the existing assets, and you'll find that almost anything you want to do is already there in whole or in part, and you can kind of copy the Blizzard assets and change them around and change what the unit model looks like or whatever, and you have something that's indistinguishable from a brand new, totally made asset. Mm-hmm. So almost everything in LifeForce is like a Blizzard asset that I copied and reworked and changed some variables. And so I think that kind of saved me a lot of time, but at the same time, like I had to know what I was doing just to know which things to copy and where the effect trees are and all those little things.
Right. I've heard that the data editor is one of the hardest things to learn, and I think if you can take some Blizzard assets or assets that anybody else has really made, and it's really just able to copy paste, and I've heard the same thing from many people, and which is copy pasting is your friend. You don't have to feel bad about copy pasting because it's the best way to have a foundation to start with.
Oh, yeah, totally. And there's this awesome quote by Bill Gates. I think it's Bill Gates. It's Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. And he says, I love having lazy employees because they find the easiest way to do things. Mm-hmm. You know, there's no shame in being lazy and finding the most opportune way to do what you need to do.
Oh, sure.
Does that make sense?
So earlier you talked about bank data, and personally, and I've said this for a long time going back, this isn't just after playing LifeForce, but you've really captured something that I think is really important, which is actually utilizing bank data, because I feel like that's a way to personalize your campaign in a way. And I think for a long time now I've been saying, you know, I wish more people would utilize bank data because it's such a cool opportunity to, you know, be able to use save games and utilize player choice. I mean, the thing is, obviously, you have to make different things within your maps to accommodate that. So how much work was it to incorporate two different morality trees, if you will, for two of the missions? How difficult was it to incorporate the tech trees?
Not that hard. The bank data itself, the triggers are fairly straightforward. There's a couple weird little caveats that Blizzard included, and this one, another one of those like almost artificially difficult things where you always, like, for example, you always have to, whenever you want to save data, you have to have an open bank trigger, and then you can start doing the bank triggers. And it's like, why would Blizzard not just turn that on at the beginning of every map? Like, there's weird little caveats like that when using bank stuff. And also, I guess the bank triggers themselves are actually pretty straightforward once you get into it. And the only reason I can think that more people don't use bank data is because A, they don't know how to use those kind of tricky triggers, and B, maybe that they just don't know what they want to save, like what to carry over. Like I said, the bank triggers themselves are pretty easy to do, but building that big UI console of all the upgrades and making all the triggers and make it so it appropriately like enumerates the value when you click on the button, like doing all that, like probably building the Foundry was probably where I spent 40% of my time just making this campaign.
Gotcha. Well, that's
like,
good to know.
Look at those, yeah, if you pop it open and look at those triggers, it's probably like, I mean, probably a lot of it's superfluous just because I'm not a programmer. I don't really know what I'm doing, but like that by far is the biggest trigger in any campaign. It's like 500 lines long, I think.
So is it the triggering behind that, or is it the design of it, like the visual design of it, that really took the bulk of the time?
The visual design, yeah, that was a huge part. I guess both, I would say. There's lots of very little subtle design things in there. Like if you notice, all of Decker upgrades are kind of slightly like red tinted. They're all kind of red icons, and there's a little like red streak liner behind a lot of it. And even if you look at the back wall behind the upgrades, all the guns in the gun case have red accents, and it's just like little details that kind of like make the upgrades pop. And it's the same thing on Lara's side. If you look at like the canister on the, not the canister, but like kind of the gun rack on the left behind Lara, like you're going to see the miniguns have little blue accents and blue lighting. So I think 90% of people don't even notice that, but it kind of adds this little like character flair that kind of brings the personalities of the characters back into the UI console. Mm-hmm. And it's those little things like that like I'm always tweaking and perfecting, and like stuff I can't put down. Like that's what I guess ate up my whole time investment on that.
Okay. So how would you feel if someone copy pasted what you've done to help incorporate something with bank data that they're doing?
If they just copied my trigger exactly, I guess I'm not. I guess I'd be like a little perturbed, but like they say, imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, so I can't be too mad about that. And the other thing is that trigger has so many variables and like weird little things about it that just looking at it, like you're not really going to understand how it works, or you have to understand not only the dialogues, like the dialogue is like the big text box where all the buttons and clicking are. You have to understand how that works and how variables interact with that, but also the variables that control the integers of the upgrade levels. Like there's so many moving parts in there that I'm not that worried about it. But if someone wanted to learn enough about my strategy to like implement that, I mean, that's just as hard as doing it yourself. Mm-hmm. So I can't, you know what I mean? So it's not that big of a deal.
Right. Yeah, that wasn't meant to be a trick question. I understand that you wouldn't want anyone to just blatantly take it. But, you know, I'm saying it would be a good idea for other people who are listening maybe to use it as a foundation to understand how this was used. Because, again, I really like the idea of utilizing bank data. It just seems like such an underused opportunity for people to incorporate within campaigns. I wanted to ask you, and this is always not like a hot topic, but it's definitely something that I think everyone has some differing thoughts on, and that is how you balanced your campaign in terms of difficulty. You do have 3 levels of difficulty, mm-hmm. and there's a lot of custom. I mean, all of the enemy AIs are custom made. So I'm curious to know, because you can't just turn on, as far as I know, you can't just turn on an AI to be, you know, hard or brutal setting when it's completely custom made. Right. So I'm curious to know how you went about testing and balancing that in a way that you felt comfortable with releasing under those difficulty levels.
Yeah, that's a really great question. As I was building it, when I play tested, and I play tested, I don't know, 1,000 times just to make sure everything's working and the actors and the units and the waves. When I'm testing it, I'm playing it on brutal. I'm a Diamond Terran player on ladder, so like I know Terran mechanics really well, and obviously you really basically play as like a highly modified Terran. And so I play brutal until it's kind of a little bit challenging for me, but not that much. Something I can pay attention to and beat. And because I designed it and I know it inside out, and plus since I'm like a pretty decent ladder player, like anyone who plays it's gonna get pretty overwhelmed. So basically what I do to scale it back is I actually give it to my younger brother, who's also a diamond player, and I have him play it, see what he thinks about the scale, and if he thinks brutal feels about brutal, then we go ahead and keep that. And then to scale it down to easier difficulties, there's lots of very subtle, small things to do. As in, if you were watching like someone play normal versus brutal, just watching them play, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It's because there's lots of small tweaks that keep it looking and feeling the same, but it's just a little bit harder. And those are things like adding enemy unit life and armor to their maximum. Like, for example, the Lyotes in stage 1 or the dust bugs in stage 3. Each increasing difficulty up from normal. I believe they have 40 extra hit points. And you'll actually see like those big old mammoth bugs. I think those have 400 or 500 more hit points. And on different difficulties, the player's hero energy regen is much slower on brutal compared to hard.
Oh,
which is actually kind of interesting too. So it really forces you to micro a little harder and be more conscious of your energy regen. And on normal, I kind of designed it so it's a little more difficult than a move. Like, I mean, that sounds like it's a little disparaging to normal players, but like just understanding the economy and there's so many new units being thrown around and just wrapping your head around all of that, like it's a lot to take in with a new campaign, especially when I'm throwing new stuff at you.
Absolutely.
On allies and the enemy side, like in LifeForce.
So the boss fights, is that kind of the same idea, or did you just think like this would be a cool mechanic that the player would have to dodge, and you just tried it? Were there any mechanics that you may have tried to incorporate with bosses that didn't really go so well on the first go around, and you had to change it up?
Well, usually when I'm kind of planning the bosses, so much thought goes in on the pen and paper side before I even open the editor that like I'm scrapping ideas and throwing them together that by the time I open the editor, I kind of know what I want to do. And I've already invested so much time that if something doesn't really work that well, I just jam it and make it work. Like kind of an example is going to be a little bit of a spoiler, but in level 4 on mission 4, there's a boss who has these kind of flame vents that like flash on the ground and then these flames pop up. And to do that, there's actually doodads placed on the ground, these like little green lines. And I couldn't figure out for the longest time how to like make them appropriately kind of like look like they were etched into. Kind of the whole point is you're kind of in this big cathedral kind of room, and I wanted to like carry that flow in with the flame vents. But anytime I had the AI try to place them, they're all kind of like in weird angles and they look all mismatched, and like kind of the targeting frame was just like, it just looked bad. So I was like, okay, how can I make this work? Because I really wanted to add that kind of mechanic to the boss fight. So I placed the flame vents as doodads all over the map and have these rotating after events firing all the time. And if you open up the trigger editor, you're going to see like 50 triggers all handle that, and there's just so much going back and forth. But I think in the end it ended up being really great because like when the fire kind of flames up, it's always like this symmetrical kind of grid that kind of looks like it's built in. It's not just like, you know, actor splat like when the boss of level 2 is throwing boxes. It just flashes on the screen and like disappears wherever. So I guess what I'm saying is like in creating a boss, I think about so much about where they belong in the environment. Like, how is this boss built into this whole story, and are they giving you attacks that like are logical for what kind of person or monster they are? And you know, that's a big part of it, is like, does it feel like this kind of belongs here? Like, does this boss fit?
Okay. So would you say that that's very similar to your mission design? I guess the same question, and I assume the answer is about the same, which is when you design any of your missions outside of just the boss fights, did you have anything that maybe you realized maybe was a little too far to be able to actually accomplish in one of these maps, or did everything actually just work out quite well?
Well, the editor itself is so powerful. Like, it's almost like it actually is redundantly powerful. There's so many ways to do almost anything. Like, if you look at mission 4, I have these mini games that almost have no place being in StarCraft, and I just kind of like built them in there almost just to see if I could and it would be fun and if it makes sense. So like kind of worrying about like if I could do something, like that wasn't so much like a limiter for me. Let's see. I'm sure there's like an example of something I was trying to do and then kind of couldn't. I'm so sorry. I guess I'm just perfect and I can do everything. No.
No, I mean that's fine. I don't expect everyone to have an answer to that because I mean that's the thing about this campaign. And anytime you hear people, everyone else saying, "Oh, this seems so polished," it seems so polished because it really is. I mean, it's really. I mean, this, and I don't know if you've played Shadow of the Xel'Naga, but this both LifeForce and that campaign, you can tell it's palpable the amount of planning that went into it, and I think that makes a very big difference. And I mean, I do know that you've been working on this. Well, I don't know for how long, but I know it's been a long time. If you want to shed some light on how long this has been in progress.
Yeah, I first, I guess, kind of broke ground on the project May of last year when I first started building Mission 1. Started designing kind of the Razorface hero and putting together his abilities. And that first map alone took me about 6 months. And as I kind of get more and more practice and do it more often, like I'm really speeding up. Like the last mission only took me about 5 weeks to do. So... and plus, I think like I'm better at planning too, so I'm not backtracking and doing like the same thing over and over.
Sure.
In terms of like terrain and data and that kind of stuff. So yeah.
How important was
what was the original question? Sorry.
I
think it was the polish thing, like kind of when you're talking about like planning the levels and that kind of stuff.
Right.
I wanted to say like. When I first start planning a mission, the very first thing I do is I think about kind of the tile set or planet it'll take place on. Every mission in LifeForce is a completely different like planet, so it's going to have like unique stuff in terms of like plant life and all that kind of stuff, and whether there's man-made cliffs or Protoss cliffs or things like that. So even going forward with the next missions, I'm thinking like, okay, what planets or terrains do I want it to take place on, and what would make that kind of environment come alive? And yeah, like I mentioned with the boss, like, does this all kind of fit? Like in Mission 3 that you're playing now, like, we have these colonists, and they're not like trained soldiers, so they have these kind of like tricky flame weapons, and they build these flame drones and that kind of stuff, and it takes LifeForce kind of coming in and like taking over control, and then you all kind of work together. And that's actually a dynamic I actually was inspired from Warcraft 2, which is each mission, you get a little more notoriety and you're fighting these orcs, and then you have this dramatic voice like, the dwarves of Khadgar like sacrificed their griffin riders for you, and then in like the next mission you get those guys.
So you played, did you ever make anything in the Warcraft 3 editor? I know you said the older Warcraft editor. But in terms of, did you try anything newer, like the StarCraft Brood War editor, or?
Oh yeah. I had a lot of experience in the Brood War editor. Again, without like downloading add-on stuff, there's just not that powerful. I know there were like some cool RPGs and stuff out there, but I guess I just felt overwhelmed. Same kind of thing with the Warcraft 3 editor. I know that sounds funny because StarCraft 2 editor is so much more intense and steeper learning curve, but I do remember popping open the Warcraft 3 editor and like playing around with it and training and looking through stuff and just being like, I can't figure this out. I don't know what I'm doing, and I closed it and I didn't ever sadly open it again. And was it till StarCraft 2? I think there was like multiple times of me opening it up and getting frustrated and closing it and like giving up, and then just having this creative spark and be like, no, I got to go back and learn this. And that's how it all kind of started, with me just lurking around Mapster, asking dumb questions, not being afraid to fail and look dumb. Like that's a huge part of it. Like I see people posting sometimes and they're like, hey, sorry, I keep posting. Anyway, I wanted to know this. And it's like, well, if you don't do that, you're not going to learn how to make an awesome campaign. Like you just can't learn fast enough to viably like learn everything. Mm-hmm. And like, I guess it was a weird realization for me when I started going to Mapster, and I'm like, that's weird. I'm like answering more questions than I'm asking now. Like, and then just out of nowhere, like that just kind of slowly started happening. And then kind of weirdly, very slowly out of nowhere, people would be like, hey, like I saw you posted this other topic. Can you help me like this? And I'm like, do people think I know what I'm talking about now? Like, it's a very weird thing.
Well, you've accomplished a lot, and you've actually released a campaign. I've noticed that a lot of people, they plan and plan and plan. So I wonder if there's a very fine line between planning and over-planning, because you've obviously planned a lot for this campaign, and most of the best campaigns, it's very clear how much planning goes into it. But did you ever feel like there was a point when you may not have been able to actually execute on top of the plans that you had made?
Well, like I said, planning is the funnest, most exciting part because, like, it really is because you're thinking about the storyline and like all these cool heroes and this like amazing twist and like these incredible battles and like I have probably made up like 100 campaigns like just in my head, but like it's just the slog of digging in and the editor loads so slow and then you have to tweak this and go back and like just that time investment, like that's what turns people off. And like yeah, like you said, the whole planning thing, people get like so invested in planning. And I guess the fine line would be like if you're actually, even if you're spending 15 minutes a day, if you're like actually in front of the editor and you can like go to bed that night and be like, okay, I made it a tiny bit closer to like creating this, I did a good job. Because it's not like I worked on this every day or sometimes every week, but I remember doing tiny things like if you look at the brimstone tank in mission 3, like the way its barrel goes back when it shoots, like it has a really fast actor event to make it shoot back, and then it loads forward really slow because the recoil is so slow on the tank, and it's much, much slower than your average siege tank. And I remember working on that. I was spending like 20, 30, 40 minutes just like perfecting that kind of like recoil arc. And I remember laughing to myself and be like, will anyone ever even notice this? Is this even like a thing that I should be doing? But then it's like, I'm not, and I think about it like I myself, get joy out of the fact that it will be perfect when I look at it later. Like I'll see someone playing it or I'll play it myself and I'll be like, that's a really cool looking siege flame shot. Mm-hmm. And I guess so to stay motivated, you got to look at it from like you yourself as your pet project. You want this to be like perfect. You want it to have like, so much polish, and it's just awesome. And like, I love all these emails that I'm getting, like emails in all caps, like this map is period so period good, and like just like super excited stuff like that. That's exciting for me. Mm-hmm. And the support I'm getting from people in like, Chile and Japan and Slovakia and Russia and Ireland, and it's like people everywhere, just like, I've been really happy with the amount of donations I've gotten. People have been so generous, or even just the emails, or like people talking about balance in the YouTube comments. It's just like such an exciting feeling to know that like I had this little dream in my head and then I like set it on fire and put it out there, and now like people are having this fun campaign to play. So, I love bringing that kind of feeling to people.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, did you have the entire story planned when you actually started working?
No, I did not. Even the story, I mean, it kind of starts, I have the whole story kind of like rough in my head now, but as I like complete each mission, the missions going forward get a little more refined. And so in the mission, in mission 1, but even by the time I finished mission 1, I did not even know where the story was going to go. I was just like, okay, let me set up something crazy. Like, let's throw this like kind of Zergy hero out there, and like, let's just make a cool first mission. Like, the first mission really sets the tone for any campaign, and everyone judges a book by its cover. If the first mission isn't cool, and if it doesn't capture you, there's no way you're playing the second. And so the very goal of the first mission. In real life, I work in advertising and marketing, so I know a lot about like capturing attention and holding on to it. And really, the first objective of the mission that I was trying to kind of put people in is like, I want to play this next one, and that's why you have this like really interesting Razorface hero. You kind of have this relationship starting between like Lara, this robot, and then Decker, this kind of like assholey renegade guy. And it's like, who are these guys? What are they doing? Like, what's going to happen here? And so each kind of mission, I guess, builds drama a little bit and tries to kind of instill that same kind of feeling you get when you're watching a TV show, which is like, at the commercial break, am I going to flip it or keep watching? I try to think of it from a psychology standpoint like that. Like, is this going to capture someone? Are they interested in what's happening next? And you see that most obviously and clearly at the end of mission 4, it's like this cliffhanger. And, obviously I put some thought into that because I want people to still be enthused when this comes back in a while, and they still need to remember that cliffhanger, mm-hmm. and sort of, think about it from a, psychological standpoint like that. So, yeah, I guess to answer succinctly, in planning the missions, like the first mission is just fun. Like, try to get people to have fun during that mission.
For sure. And I think you definitely accomplished that. It was very unique. I mean, because this takes place on a timeline. I mean, in my personal opinion, the fact that it ties into existing StarCraft isn't the important part so much as it doesn't exist in the known StarCraft timeline. So, mm-hmm. It's before, whether it's not part of StarCraft as we know it, or it's just at a different time frame, which is the case. I think it's most interesting that it's in a time frame where you can't realistically include your typical Zerg, baddie Zerg. You can't include your typical mystical Protoss because they're not known to these groups of people. And if you do make it known, then that kind of adds a different layer to the plot where because it takes place in the past, and you can go many different directions. So I think that was an excellent choice. So that and the first mission was especially intriguing because you're fending off these Lyotes, and you're wondering like, what is this, like, what am I really doing here? Is this really the first mission? I'm killing wildlife. But it was so well done because the LifeForce group is so fun and different to play, and that's the most important thing. Is it's so different to play that really hooks the player in. And I just wanted to. There's not really a question there. I'm just pointing out how cool I think that is.
Well, I have something to add to that. Like, with the whole LifeForce, as an entity, like, I wanted their motivations to be really unique from anything people have played in StarCraft from a story perspective. Like, you look at Lara and Decker, and not only do they not agree between them, and they kind of, like, rely on the Magistrate, but, like, even going forward in the mission, like, you don't really know what you're supposed to do. Even on missions as a whole, like in Mission 3, for instance, which you're playing, like, the point is to save these people. And then, like, you look at Mission 2, and it's, like, to kill these people, and you're really just this gun for hire. Like, you don't have a lot of say in it, and you're chasing the money. Like, you're this, you're this squad going out there just doing whatever it takes. And in StarCraft, you have these factions that are like, here's what we're doing for the good of the people, like the good of our faction versus evil. Like, it's very political. It's very like military in the most classic sense. Like, you're controlling like the government's military. I guess what you could say for the Protoss or Terran, or for Zerg, obviously they get a free pass because they're just like big bugs with a hive mind. But yeah, like LifeForce is just much. Like, I just wanted to create a very new feel, in every aspect, from the units you get to like how they approach problems to how it fits into the lore. Like, when I first started building this, one of the problems I ran into is I wanted to have these cool talking portraits to bring life to the characters, but you look at all the portraits and it's like, oh, like that's Mengsk or that's Tychus, and like I'm reading like. It says their name is something else, but it's like it kind of ruins the illusion when it's like, well, it's just Tychus, but you're calling him something else. Like, that kind of like. I mean, I've played some awesome campaigns that have done this, like they're very well done, but I feel like that partially like kind of ruins the illusion. So that's the reason I chose Decker's portrait to be the least used portrait in the entire game.
Colonel Orlan. I know Colonel Orlan.
Exactly. It's Orlan, yeah. And even now, I'm like still trying to go back and see if I can play with the textures a little bit and like give him a beard or make him like look different in some respect.
So how hard is it, on that similar topic, how hard is it to modify portraits like that? That's something I personally have always wondered, because I've never messed with things like that. So people who make unique portraits and things like that, how does that... I mean, this is as broad of a way I could phrase this as possible, but how does that really work? Have you done a lot of messing around with that? Because you said you changed the way that the siege tanks fire.
Yeah. Well, the way units, like their kind of skin looks, that's governed by these, like, basically they're called DDS files, and they're basically like these little pictures of color. And I like to call them the old masters, like the old masters of Mapster. You have like people like Borg Dragon and Super Evil, and like there's a few other people that even when I showed up, it seemed like they knew everything about everything. And there's this really old tutorial by this guy named Borg Dragon about how to switch a texture on any model. So, and that's what you'll notice I did on the Enforcer model. It's just a Tychus model, but with a white skin. So, there's this really weird tutorial, again, Blizzard making things super difficult, where it has like 11 steps, and 3 or 4 of them just seem like they don't make any sense or connect to anything, and you have to do all these steps, and then you can upload a new texture file to a unit. And even when you do it, when you load up the editor and it does it, it comes up with all these warning messages, and then you run it and it works in the game. It's like, well, okay. So a lot of it, yeah, like just jumping on Mapster and looking for these tutorials and like bothering people until they're sick of me to answer my questions and that kind of stuff. Like, that's really that when you get into that kind of nitty gritty, that's how you really learn the most.
Okay. So if I was interested in starting a map, I had a spark of genius and I really, really wanted to try something, where would you recommend? I mean, what was your absolute starting point?
The absolute starting point is you have to jump into the editor and start playing with things and looking at things, and like get used to that overwhelmed feeling of like, I don't understand any of these words. What does this mean? What does this mean? Like, like go in and look at that kind of stuff and just get to a point where you can like figure out where your knowledge stops. Like if you look at the unit tab and you look at like, okay, here's the unit name, here's its movement speed, here's its other things, and be like, okay, like I understand this. Kind of like give yourself a little starting point, and then kind of in relation to what you're trying to do. Like say you're trying to make, a campaign, and you're like, okay, I want to make it so Marines, their stim pack lasts twice as long. Like go in and like look at the different things of, look at the abilities on the unit, and you're like, okay, you find stim pack, and you start looking at the effects of the ability, and then eventually you'll get down to the behavior duration, which is 15 seconds on stim pack, and be like, okay, so that's where that is. And so I guess what I'm saying is the best way is to learn by doing, like have an objective and try to build something, and don't give up when you're like, oh, but it'd be easier to just change it and make it this way. Be like, okay, I want to figure out how to tweak this just the way I need it. And like when you dig down and get to those like little details, like that's when you learn the most and start learning how to make a campaign.
Mm-hmm. That's really excellent advice. So copy paste, plan a
yeah,
lot.
Copy paste is my best friend.
Copy paste, plan a lot, and just get your hands dirty. Just get your hands dirty with small things as soon as possible.
Yeah, totally. Like for instance, if you look at the repair bots on the Civics Hub, the mech repair beam, they have really interesting little AI properties that kind of wander around the Civics Hub, and when something needs healing, they'll run over to it and heal it, and it just looks really cool. But like all I did was I found the repair bot that the carriers have in the LOTV campaign. I copied it across and I put a new model on it, and then assigned it to the Civics Hub, and then I was done.
That's cool. See, the more you know, that's not what I would have expected. To me, as just a casual player who doesn't understand really I understand the time that goes in, but I don't understand the real technical, the technical ways that things are made. I would have just thought that you took a custom. I recognize the model, but I figure you just took the model and you programmed it to do something. So that's really cool to know. And I think that makes, in my opinion, that makes this seem a lot more accessible. It doesn't make it any more or less impressive. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is it makes it feel like I could try this eventually, which is the best part.
And what's funny is there's certain things like for instance, the Enforcer has a passive ability which lets them shoot faster inside a bunker, and like when you pop them in, and it's not that spectacular of a wow kind of ability, but like that ability took me the longest to put into the editor, just because like assigning new behaviors to units inside of bunkers and then removing it when they get out, you really have to change the whole language of how the bunker works. So every single unit that can go into a bunker and out of it, I have to reassign properties to it because of that passive spell of the Enforcer existing. Mm-hmm. So it's really misleading what looks like a lot of work versus like what actually is a lot of work.
Gotcha. Okay. That is interesting. I think, as someone who works in IT, it's always the minute things that actually end up taking the longest. Is that attention to detail is what takes the most time. Like you were saying, you spent a ton of time on the siege tank firing, and you think, well, is anyone even going to notice this? But you stick to it, and it's really satisfying when you do accomplish it.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Some other things that were like super hard to make were like the plasma gun on top of the Civics Hub, like popping that up there and making it shoot and that kind of stuff. I think maybe just at face value that looks a little tougher. And then one of my favorite things in the game that was also kind of a huge bitch to put in was the repulsor turret on the bunkers, like making it kick units backwards. Mm-hmm. And that was hard just because there's not really anything good to copy and paste that does that in the default, StarCraft assets. Like what kind of has that force effect of like kicking units backwards? So like, well, nothing really. Like the Reaper Mine does do that, but it does it in a very different way. It's just really interesting to see like what's really tough and like what's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. So I have two more questions. One is not as serious, so we'll start with that one. So can we expect these secret towers that I painstakingly found to do anything, or is it just like the biggest troll of all time?
No, it is definitely not a troll. They are definitely mysterious, and they will play not a huge part, but they will play a part in the next missions. Like things are going to happen with them. You will get an explanation from like an actual character as to what they do, and but I can't give anything else away without kind of like pulling back the curtain too much. but they do play a role. You're not wasting your time, and you will be glad you got them.
Great. Okay, that's good to know. And then also you had mentioned, because you're in advertising, and I when we were sharing private messages, I mentioned you have seemed to have gotten some of the most positive feedback I've seen on the StarCraft subreddit, which is one of many forums, but traditionally the StarCraft subreddit is full of pedantic assholes, and traditionally is all about multiplayer, which is fine. And I'm just kind of curious on what's your take on the custom campaign scene, because in my opinion, just based on my channel growth just in the past year, there's definitely an audience for these types of campaigns. There's definitely a player base for these campaigns, and I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are on how we could outreach better, because SC2 Mapster is I would almost consider it a legacy site at this point. It's based on old curse architecture, and they keep saying they're going to update us, and they don't. But the point is, they own everything on the site, and we can't move it. So I'm curious to know, like, what do you think the best way to outreach and get players to see this? Because I know there's so many players that would be interested that just haven't seen these things yet.
Yeah, and that's something I am really concerned about myself too. Like, I wish I could get the word out there, and I know there's so many players like who would play this if they knew it existed, and it's like, well, I'm not gonna like buy Facebook ads or anything. That's just like not like I'm not gonna do that. But I think probably the best way is to just have more support for Blizzard. Blizzard's arcade is not based for campaigns. It's based for like quick fire, like run units at each other, like kind of like 15 to 20 minute deathmatch kind of games, and so there's no save load. There's no kind of campaign continuity, which is really funny because every time I see an interview with a Blizzard person or they're talking about the work they're doing, and then they always talk about like, oh, people love it when we release new campaigns, like people love that new kind of content, but there's no follow-up with that same kind of vein when you look at like the way Blizzard is setting up kind of the future of StarCraft. It is a really competitive online game, and so I see them capturing onto that, and like that's really great, but I think that appeals to like a slightly different audience. Like, you have those really hardcore intense gamers who love watching like Koreans duke it out with incredible micro, and I do too. Like, I watch those things too, but like the whole campaign scene from Blizzard, like they just aren't really enthused about that. And right. I guess to answer your question, like I'd love to see them, have a more active role, or like putting links to campaigns on the loader when you first open up the console. You have all that news, and I've seen people with like writing comics about StarCraft on there, and it's like, well, they should have like here's the new campaigns that came out this month showcase, or like maybe something in the Battle.net console, and it's like, here's the campaigns. Because I do have a single player tab on there, but it's just not well organized, and it's definitely an afterthought. And something else I just thought of that would definitely apply to this is that they I already said that they don't have save load in the campaigns or on
in the arcade, right?
Yeah,
and it was incorporated in Warcraft 3, and I did watch some of the community figures follow-ups to the community summit, and they couldn't share a lot, but they did say Blizzard is accounted for way more than you'd ever consider. So it makes me wonder what's going on behind the scenes. But one thing in particular, and I'm not sure if it was Loco or Winter StarCraft, but somebody mentioned the idea that some things just won't get implemented because there's not a large enough audience. And that's where I'm thinking, like, I wonder if there's just a disconnect where they think nobody cares, but it's kind of a catch-22, because nobody cares because there's not enough exposure, because they can't really be put on the arcade. They can, but it's really your users are going to have trouble accessing these, because you can't access them in order. Players are going to think they're solo missions when it's actually part of a campaign, so on and so forth. So I agree. I hope that Blizzard does get a bit more active.
Yeah, it's really kind of a chicken and egg problem, and there's like, oh, there's no interest for it, and it's like, well, is that because it's not being put in front of people as an option, or because like no one really wants to play it? And I'm not like, that's not a rhetorical question, I'm actually kind of wondering that. But another kind of stick in the road is you have these map file maxes you can allow on Battle.net, and when you have games like LifeForce that have a lot of custom models in there, like models or new textures or sounds. Like I have custom music in a lot of the levels too. Like that eats up a ton of space. Like when you download all 4 missions, there's no mod file, so it's 288 megs. So that's like a pretty big chunk, and I don't think Blizzard wants to like host all that stuff or deal with that. That could be a part of it too. But they might have a really good reason, or maybe the interest just isn't really there and people want to concentrate on the competitive side. But even if there's just a small audience, you know, like I'm happy to like be able to bring this stuff to people, and like it just selfishly like feels good to me to build this project and then look back on it and then play it and be like, sweet, here's what I created. Like that's a cool feeling.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I mean, all I do is make videos. I play and talk to myself, and the reception that I've gotten is really, it's really extraordinary, and it all the credit really goes to you and your peers who make maps like these. And I hope that my viewers realize that. You know, you may be entertained because I'm the one who's decided to make videos of it, but you have to realize that people who are making these maps need support, and the more support that we give them, the more other people will be intrigued to make maps, and maybe we'll have old mappers come back and make new maps for their old campaigns and things like that.
Oh yeah. And I won't say Blizzard is totally to blame for not making campaigns more accessible. Like, there's not really any big, like, I want to say Mapster, like, really makes it easier for people to find maps, but Mapster is really for mappers, not for people who want to play maps. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a great community if you're trying to build something, and it does have, like, a few showcase kind of forums. But if you're, like, looking for maps, like, it's even kind of tricky because the UI is so outdated and it's just kind of an old site. Like, it's even kind of tricky to like find where the maps are, and if you're like trying to find new stuff, like you might get kind of confused and turn back. And because of that, like that's really why I decided to make my own site, where I kind of like, it's very kind of promotion heavy. Like, it's definitely a promotional site. You go there and you're like, oh, okay, like it's showcasing all this content, giving me the benefits of like how cool this is, and like you're really geared to downloading and checking out the content. Whereas Mapster, like, it's this black and brown site where it's really for people to learn about the data editor, and it's just not based around gameplay. So right. There really is no like really public facing promotional site like that, and I think that could be kind of debilitating the growth of the scene. But I mean, I'm happy to see that you're getting new subscribers and people are showing more interest, and like I just love to see the scene grow. So I mean, hopefully things pick up, or we'll all be on the editor for StarCraft 3. So who knows?
Cool. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me, and I hope we can stay in contact. And I really look forward to the future of this campaign, because there are more missions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. They're coming along.
Great. Send them to me first.
You'll get yours. Don't worry.
I'm just kidding. Just for viewers, I was offered to beta test for this, and I said, no, I like to play blind.
No, he was good. Yeah, and you want, as a viewer, you want the suspense of the blind play anyway, and you want to see like those micro choices that are like, this is this guy's first time playing. Like, that's much more exciting anyway. So you're smart to do it that way.
I am smart. You're right. Great. All right. Well, thanks again. I hope everyone enjoyed this, and I hope it was informative. If you're interested or have any questions, make sure to leave some comments, and make sure you download and play LifeForce. It's very, very fun. You could check out my playthrough, but if it seems interesting from the get-go, make sure you download and play it yourself first. All right. Thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah. Have a good one. Talk to you later.
Thanks, everybody.